Well, welcome everyone to today's course presentation, an M&A Roadmap for CPA Firms, from introduction to closing. I'm Bill Carlino, and I serve as Managing Director of National Consulting Services at Transition Advisors. We're a full-service consulting firm specializing in ownership, succession, and transition for CPA firms. Many of you might remember me. I spent 12 years as Editor-in-Chief of Accounting Today and AccountingToday.com. And today we're going to go through sort of an A to Z course on the mergers and acquisitions of CPA firms, whether you're the buyer or the seller firm, from your initial meeting to the eventual contract signing. Once again, thanks for taking the time. I know it's a busy time of year for many of you, but hopefully at the end we'll have time for some questions and you'll get a better understanding of the merger mania that is taking place within the CPA profession currently. Let's look at what we're going to tackle today. We'll look at the profession by the numbers. Then we'll look ahead a little bit in the crystal ball, what's looming as far as changes that will impact the CPA firms. The succession crisis, certainly one of the primary drivers of the merger and acquisition frenzy you're currently seeing. The question of whether to merge internally or externally. Valuations, many of you have questions about firm valuations. And of course, an overview of that all-important client and employee transition during a merger. Okay, if there are 50 things you need to think about in a transaction, the smartest of us will only think of 35. And if you're the smartest in the room, trust me, you're in the wrong room. Well, this is not your father's CPA firm. You can't run a CPA firm in 2018 like you did in 1980, and it's amazing how many people still try and do that. We're entering an era where instead of the chargeable hour, we're seeing a great movement toward value pricing and value billing, where you price on the job. About 15 to 20% of CPA firms, and that number is rapidly rising, now use some form of value pricing and value billing. Firms are moving to what they call a one partner / one firm concept rather than the individual books of business. This is where multiple partners may service the client, whereas the traditional accounting firms during the baby boomer generation usually had their own individual books of business where one partner dealt with that client specifically and no one else did. And then you're seeing that movement among what they call partner loyal firms versus brand loyal practices. And what I mean by that is many of the smaller firms, their clients are partner loyal, meaning they're familiar with the partner. They might even be friends. They might interact with them socially, playing golf. Whereas the brand loyal practices, sort of the much, much larger firms, like maybe an E&Y or a KPMG, where they may not know the partner in charge of their business, where they just are loyal to them because of their brand, maybe because their predecessors were clients of that accounting firm. So we're seeing a lot more sort of more partner loyal sort of concepts coming in. Working remotely. In 1995, there were 9.5 million remote workers, people who worked outside of the office, maybe at home, at least one day a week. That number grew to 13.5 million in 2012, and now roughly 45 million people work remotely at least once a week. And that number, incredibly, is projected to reach 75 million by the end of 2018, according to Gartner research, which is why you're seeing the rise of what we call virtual CPA firms, where the firm exists solely online with many of these cloud-based applications. And that's also ushered in a greater use of mobile devices. More than 95% of CPAs use smartphones or tablets. Personally, I think that number might even be higher. And that, as I mentioned prior, this has given the rise to the birth of virtual firms. And about 15% of all startup firms nowadays are virtual. Many of you who go into establishments such as Starbucks will see people working on laptops. Many of them are accountants, are doing client financials while they're at Starbucks. Public accounting by the numbers. This is public accounting only, not those in private practice, such as a CFO or or a controller, someone who might be in government. This is public accounting. The revenue for the last year was about 155 billion, and that includes everybody from the big four firms, which are in the billions, obviously, to the little sole practitioner who may hang out a shingle just during tax season. There are about 95,000 firms in this country. Again, that's from the biggest of the big four to the little sole practitioners. And just a little, about 1.2 million people are employed in the public accounting profession. The growth in 2018 for the top 100 firms, good news, a little over 6%. And the growth in 2018 for firms generating billings of $10 million and under, which accounts for the majority of firms, obviously, in this country, almost 7%. So that's good news. The accounting profession is and has been for a while now in a growth mode. What's keeping the CPAs awake at night? Oh, well, there's a whole litany of issues that they're dealing with. And first and foremost, attracting new clients, generating new business is always a concern. Succession planning, and we're going to go much deeper into that, obviously, since we're dealing with mergers and acquisitions. Fee pressure from clients. Ever since the recession, clients have been pressuring their accountants to either maintain their fees or to reduce their fees. Staffing, recruiting, and retention, and that goes to succession planning. There's a huge void of talent in the pipeline for the CPA profession. Talent is at a premium. What we like to call the holy grail, which is a young CPA with a big book of business, can get a job literally in any firm in the country. New regulations and standards, that's an annual concern, obviously, with a new administration, or a fairly new administration that we have in Washington. We're seeing more of that. The recent tax cut by President Trump, obviously, is an example of that. Technology, and we're going to go into how technology is sort of reshaping and reformatting how the accounting profession has traditionally operated. Software investments, which is a large part of M&A that is often overlooked. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into that later on. Going paperless, certainly part of technology. The old file cabinets, are going the way of AOL and Blockbuster Video. Nobody wants file cabinets. Everything now is online. And of course, one of the big technology concerns and security concerns are the breaches of cybersecurity. I don't think there's a week that goes by where you don't read in the newspaper where some large retailer or medical company, recently Marriott Corporation, the hospitality conglomerate, just had a massive cybersecurity breach where information on 500 million people was illegally gotten. So as you can imagine, that's been one of the most client in-demand services for CPA firms. Let's look at sort of a generational comparison here. The baby boomer generation, even before that, when you first entered the job market or the workforce, everybody was concerned about a pension. My father got a pension. I'm sure many of your fathers and parents got pensions. Now, with millennials and even younger workers, they want a purpose. The wish list. Everybody wanted a good boss. Now, their wish list is, let's have great colleagues. The hours. Oh, everybody was sort of handcuffed to a 9-to-5 job, 8-to-5, 9-to-6, whatever it was. Now it's whenever. With the increase in remote workers that I had alluded to in a previous slide, and with these cloud-based applications you can just access online, you can really work whenever. And a lot of CPA firms are becoming far more flexible about this. If people are more comfortable working, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 11 o'clock at night, they're allowed to do that. Whereas that was, say, unthinkable during the early stages of the baby boomer generation. Again, the workplace, office. Everybody wanted a nice office. Now the bricks and mortar are becoming optional. Now it's wherever. I had mentioned your local Starbucks, but you're seeing many of these companies like WeWorks and Regis popping off with these temporary staffing offices. And tenure, the whole career. What I like to say is nobody gets the gold watch anymore. Very few times will you see people staying on 35, 40 years for their whole career. Now it's whenever. Now millennials and those before that estimate they will change jobs between 8 and 12 times during their working career. And during my parents' generation, that was unthinkable. We mentioned technology. Let's look at some of the technology events that are sort of shaping the future of the accounting profession. And probably first and foremost is blockchain technology, which allows, many of you might be familiar with this, it's sort of the foundation for the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. It allows for instant verification of transactions without a central authority. Its data structure creates a sort of digital ledger called blocks, and then it's spread out over the network, and they're reconciled every 10 minutes, which makes it very, very hard to change, or almost impossible to change. It can't be changed. This will, experts sort of predict that this will eventually revolutionize the audit process, where the entire audit process can be done via a blockchain program where you really won't need auditors. And that, ditto for the tax preparation process. About 200 top financial firms, many Fortune 500 or even Fortune 50 companies now use some form of blockchain. The Internet of Things. By 2020, it's estimated the Internet of Things will connect over 50 billion devices in the United States. Your refrigerator will tell you when it needs a new filter. Ditto for your washing machine when the pump is going out. So the Internet of the IoT, what they call, will connect 50 billion devices. 3D printing. I don't know if any of you have ever had the privilege of seeing this. By the end of 2018, nearly 30% of durable goods in this country will be manufactured by 3D printing. 3D printing shipments will double this year, and 3D printers have a global market of about $14 billion. I was recently, sort of a little aside, I was at the Weill Cornell Medical Center in New York City. Many of you might be familiar with that, where they actually have now 3D printed a human heart. It's still about 5 to 10 years away from perfection, but just think about that. They have 3D printed a heart. And 5G cellular, and that's estimated to be deployed by 2020 or 2021, the latest.